إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us, and alhamdulillah we are returning to As-Siratul Nabawiyyah by the Imam Abdul Malik ibn Hisham al-Basri. And today what we're looking at is 3.6, Unit 3, Chapter 6, the rule of Hassan ibn Tubban and his murder at the hands of his brother Amr, Mulku Hassan ibn Tubban, وقتله على يد أخيه عمر. Imam Abdul Malik ibn Hisham, rahimahullah, he starts by saying the following: فلما ملك ابنه حسان بن تبان أسعد بكرب سار بأهل اليمن يريد أن يطأ بهم أرض العرب وأرض العجائم حتى إذا كانوا ببعض أرض العراق قال ابن هشام بالبحرين فيما ذكر لي بعض أهل العلم كرهت حمير وقبائل اليمن المسير معه. When Hassan, the son of Tubban, As'ad Abi Karb, or Tubban Tuba'a II, became the king, he went to the people of Yemen with the intent in mind of walking over the Arabs and the non-Arabs. So that some of the people of knowledge mentioned to me that the Himyar and other tribes of Yemen traveling did not like that plan. Close quote. Now, one of the things that he mentioned is that he wanted to walk over the Arabs and the non-Arabs to the point that even some of the land of Iraq he wanted to take hold of, and some of Al-Bahrain as well. But they didn't like that plan. Right? So Hassan ibn Tubban was looking to try to extend his kingship to become a much mightier king than he was. Because at this time, you have to remember, then and now, Arabs don't have a royal tradition as you would look at for other nations. So for example, if you look at England, they have a history of trying to expand their empire to rule over vast different amounts of people. Normally Arabs, when they're muluk, when they're kings, they tend to be umara, they tend to be amirs over their governance, and then they might enter into another contract with another king, so they become umara over an area. A great example of this is the United Arab Emirates. So that's 7 emirates, and each emir is malik over his particular emirate. He's malik over his imara. And so how the imara develops is based upon what he so chooses. But together they form the United Arab Emirates. The Arab kings don't have resplendent thrones and elaborate coronation procedures. If you look at the coronation of the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II, well, the late Queen. If you look at other kings throughout history, they have these really elaborate ceremonies. The Arab kings don't. Hassan, son of Tubban, he sort of wanted to change that by expanding his strength and his power and his might. And the people of Yemen, the tribes of Yemen and the Himyar, they didn't like that. So we'll look at what happens after that. The Imam carries on by saying, quote, وَرَادُ رَجَعَ إِلَى بِلَادِهِمْ وَأَهْلِهِمْ فكلموا أخا له يقال له عمر وكان معه في جيشه فقالوا له اقتل أخاك حسان ونملك علينا وترجع بنا إلى بلادنا فأجابهم فاجتمع على ذلك إلا ذا رعين الحميري فإنه نهاه عن ذلك فلم يقبل منه فقال ذو رعين. They had decided they were going to return to their land and people and put the idea to the brother of Hassan, whose name was Amr. Amr had been with his brother in the army before and was asked by the people, "Why don't you just kill your brother and we'll make you the king over ourselves? You could return with us to our country." Amr decided to agree to that, and they quickly gathered their forces together, with the exception of one person by the name of Dhu Ru'ayn al-Himyari. Dhu Ru'ayn forbade them from doing so, but the people did not listen. When he was rejected, he recited these words: ألا من يشتري سهرا بنوم سعيد من يبيت قرير عين فإما حميار غدرت وخانت فمعذرة الإله الذي يرعين. Is not the one who preserves his aspiration happier indeed than the one who gives up his sleep for power and greed? Dhu Ru'ayn has sought the pardon and excuse of the only God of truth, no matter what the Himyar do with the assistance of that youth. ثم كتبهما في ركعة وختم عليها ثم أتى بها عمرا فقال له: ضع لي هذا الكتاب عندك. ففعل ثم قتل عمرو أخاه حسان ورجع بمن معه إلى اليمن. فقال رجل من حمير. He wrote down the pieces of poetry in a piece of cloth and sealed it. After which time Dhu Ru'ayn brought it to Amr. He said to him, "Put down this letter for me in front of you." When he did so, the next thing Amr did was to kill his brother Hassan. After which time he returned to Yemen with the other people to rule. One of the men of the Himyar present for the assassination said, لا عين الذي رأى مثلي حسان قتيلا في سالف الأحقاب. My eyes, to the best of my opinion, have not seen one like Hassan. He was killed after a long time of rule by his fellow man. قتلته مقاول خشية الحبس غداة قالوا لباب لبابي. A group killed him, fearing reprisal and detention as well. When the day after came, the killers only mouthed, "Oh well, oh well." ميتكم خيرنا وحيكم رب علينا وكلكم أربابي. Your death was a blow. You were the best of us, and your life was that of the best of us. You were Lord over us. In fact, all of you acted as lords over us. قال ابن إسحاق وقوله لا بابي لبابي لا بأس بلغة حمير. قال ابن هشام ويروى لبابي لبابي. Ibn Ishaq mentioned that the expression oh well, lababi lababi, is the Himyar variant of the Arabic la ba's, no harm done. However, the expression can also be transmitted as libabi, oh well, and is what they said. هلاك عمر وتفرق حميار. قال ابن إسحاق فلما نزل عمر ابن تبان اليمن منع منه النوم وسلط عليه السهر. فلما جهدوا ذلك سأل الأطباء وحزاء من الكهان والعرافين عما به. We then mention the subject of the death of Amr and the splitting up of Himyar tribes. Once Amr, the son of Tuba'a II, came to Yemen, he was unable to sleep at night and had insomnia, and this was his only friend. When it became too difficult for him to bear, he sought advice of doctors, al-atibba, and astrologers, al-huzzat, from the diviners, min al-kuhan, numerologists, to find out what was wrong with him, the arifin. فقال له قائل منهم, one of them said to him, إنه ما قتل رجل قد أخاه أو ذا رحمه بغيا على مثل ما قتلت أخاك عليه إلا ذهب نومه وسلط عليه السهر. فلما قيل له ذلك جعل يقتل كل من أمره بقتل أخيه حسان من أشراف اليمن. One of the people said to Amr, it is the case that when a man kills his own brother or near relative with evil according to what you did to your brother, He's bound to be deprived of sleep and have insomnia take over. When Amr realized what had happened, he sent out an edict to have executed all those who had pushed him to kill his brother Hassan. And among those killed were even some from among the notables of Yemen. حتى خلص إلى ذي رعين فقال له ذو رعين إن لي عندك براءة فقال وما هي؟ قال الكتاب الذي دفعته إليك فأخرجه فإذا البيتان فتركه ورأى أنه قد نصحه وهلك العمر فمرج أمر حميار عند ذلك فتفرقوا. The ruling came even to Dhu Ru'ayn from earlier. But Dhu Ru'ayn reminded him, I have an excuse, and I'm innocent as far as you're concerned. Amr replied, what excuse do you have? Dhu Ru'ayn answered, the letter that I brought to you before you committed the act. There were 2 stanzas of poetry written therein. Amr left the man, went, and saw what had happened, as well as the words in the letter. He had been advised. Immediately after that, Amr died. When that happened, Himyar as a nation broke into different disputing parties among themselves. خبر لخنيعة وذي نواس. Unit 3, Chapter 7. لخنيعة and ذو نواس. فوثب عليهم رجل من حميار لم يكن من بيوت المملكة يقال له لخنيعة ينوف ذو شناتر فقتل خيارهم وعبث ببيوت أهل المملكة منهم. فقال قائل من حميار للخنيعة. There then came to Himyar, to the Himyar people, a man from their people, but not from the royal household. His name was Lakhni'a Yanuf Dhu Dhanatir. Dhu Shanatir. He killed their best people and abused the royal household as well. Someone from Himyar said to Lakhni'a, تقتل أبناها وتفنى سراتها وتفنى بأيديها لها ذل حمير فتدمر دنياها بطيش حلمها وما ضيعت من دينها فهو أكثر كذاك القرون قبل ذاك بظلمها وإسرافها تأتي الشرور فتخسر. You slaughter our sons and take the females as slaves. Himyar is slain by its own hands with humiliation these days. You annihilate its life by sheer force of arms. But what you have done to its religion is of greater harm. So just as the times before were known for oppression, as well as the evil and waste that came later in progression. فسوق لخنيعة وكان لخنيعة امرأ فاسقا يعمل عمل قوم لوط فكان يرسل الغلام من أبناء الملوك ويقع عليه في مشربة له قد صنعها لذلك لئلا يملك بعد ذلك. Addressing the rebellious sin of Lakhni'a. Lakhni'a was an evil person and an evil ruler who practiced homosexual acts after the people of Lut, Nabiyuna Lut alayhi salam. And he would send for the young boys among the sons of the kings. Once they were brought to him, he would initiate his wickedness on them, so that none of them would be able to rule or hold sway after that. ثم يطلع من مشربته تلك إلى حرسه ومن حضر من جنده وقد أخذ مسواكا فجعله في فيه أي فيعلمه أنه قد فرغ منه حتى بعث إلى زرعة ذو نواس ابن تبان أسعد أخي حسان. He would seek out every youth in this way, and when he was finished, his army would know he was complete when he put his miswak in his mouth and wet it. And all of this carried on until word of this reached Zur'a Dhu Nuwas, the son of Tubba'a II, the brother of Hassan. Close quote. Now, this is an important point. So, Lakhni'a used to practice, Dhu Shanatir, used to practice the acts of the people of Nabiyuna Lut alayhi salam. So the Prophet Nabiyuna Lut alayhi salam, who was the nephew of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he lived in these areas of Sudum al-Ghumara, which were these 2 cities and a wide-ranging area. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down his wrath upon them for men going with men and women going with women. Lakhni'a would practice these acts. And he would intentionally do this to the young men of the royal family because he knew that by doing this, this was a humiliation. And the people understood of the Yemen that when someone allowed that to be done to him, or if it was done to him, that he lost his rank in society. And once that was publicized, no one would ever trust any person with that rule. Now, how his army knew that he was complete is that Lakhni'a, when he finished, he would come out, put his miswak in his mouth, and wet it. Now, this was the equivalent of today, where you see the vile lewdness in cultures, especially America and the UK and others that follow this wicked path of destruction that is sure to bring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wrath upon them. When you see them show lewdness like this, what they'll tend to do in older black and white movies or current movies, if they don't show the full sex act, after the said sex act is done, they will show one of the participants or both sitting down and smoking a cigarette or lighting a cigarette and smoking it. And that is supposed to indicate to the audience or the onlooker that the sex act is now finished, it's been completed, and that sort of puts a cap on it. Well, for Lakhni'a, his way of doing that, because he wasn't a man that smoked cigarettes, was to use the miswak to wet it and put it in his mouth. And that was a sign that he was finished, he was done. He'd pleasured himself in whatever vile and abominable way he'd done, and now he's off on the next adventure or escapade. So that's the point that this was establishing. The Imam goes on to mention more about Zur'a dhun Nuwas, who's the son of Tuba'a II, the brother of Hassan. So you had the other one, which was Amr. So Amr was the brother of Hassan, but Amr had killed him. And then Amr later died suddenly. And then you had the other one that was left, Zur'a dhun Nuwas. He's the other one that's left. Right? So we'll talk about what happened with Amr, Zur'a dhun Nuwas. The Imam Abdul Malik ibn Hisham rahimahullah, he says, quote, وكان صبيا صغيرا حين قتل حسان ثم شب غلاما جميلا وسيما ذا هيئة وعقل فلما أتاه رسوله عرف ما يريد منه فأخذ سكينا جديدا لطيفا فخبأ بين قدمه ونعله ثم أتاه. Zur'a dhun Nuwas had been a small child when his brother Hassan was killed. But when he grew into manhood, he was noble, especially intelligent, and of good height and well built. When he was informed by his messenger of what had happened, he took his sharpened knife and put it between his feet and his sandals so that it was concealed. When he came into the presence of Lakhni'a, he asked for a private audience with him. فلما خلا معه وثب إليه فواثبه ذو النواس فوجاه حتى قتله ثم حز رأسه فوضعه في القوة التي كان يشرب منها ووضع مسواكه في فيه ثم خرج على الناس فقالوا له ذا نواس ارطب ثم يباس وقال سل نحماس استرتبان ذو نواس استرتبان لا بأس. Once they were alone, that was when Dhu Nawas struck and attacked Lakhni'a repeatedly with the knife until he was dead. He then severed the head of Lakhni'a from the body and put it in a small window where it could be seen by the people. He took the miswak of Lakhni'a and put it in his mouth, then came out to meet the people. They addressed him, "Is the miswak in the mouth of this man wet or dry?" Dhu Nawas said, "Well, go ahead and ask the head of this man if he was able to wet his miswak on Dhu Nawas. Go ahead and ask him. Nothing wrong with him at all." قال ابن هشام هذا كلام حميار ونحماس الرأس فنظروا إلى القوة فإذا رأس الأخنيع مقطوع فخرجوا في أثر ذي نواس حتى أدركه فقالوا يا ما ينبغي أن يملكنا غيرك إذا أرحتنا من هذا الخبيث. Once they looked at the window and saw Lakhni'a's severed head that had been in the basket, they ran behind Dhu Nawas, following behind him quickly until they caught up to him. They said, "We do not want anyone to rule over us besides you. You saved us from this filthy man." ملك ذي نواس فملكوه واجتمعت عليه حمير وقبائل اليمن فكان آخر ملوك حمير وهو صاحب الأخدود وتسمى يوسف فأقام في ملكه زمانا. The rule of Dhul Nawas begins. Shortly after the above events, they declared him the king of Himyar and his associated tribes, and they came together to agree on his kingship. He was the last of the kings of Himyar, and the person who brought about the trenches mentioned. He was named Yusuf, and his reign lasted for a period of time. Close quote. Now, there's a couple of points here to keep in mind then of what Dhul Nawas did. So Dhul Nawas, as revenge for what happened to the kingdom and also to the younger boys from the royal household, he kills Al-Khani'a. And the people asked him whether or not he'd been affected by saying, is the miswak in the mouth of this man wet or dry? Because they know if this abominable sex act has been completed, then he has completed this abominable sex act on Dhul Nawas, and he's not fit to be king, and he's also been violated. So he loses rank in society. But Dhul Nawas said, well, go ahead and ask the head of this man if he's able to wet his miswak on Dhul Nawas. Go ahead and ask him. Nothing wrong with him at all. So he retorts with, well, go ahead and ask him and see what happened. Meaning that there's no way this man got anywhere near me to do anything. So the people followed behind him and declared him that they desired him to be king. Well, you should be our king because you saved us from this filthy man. You protected us. You looked after us. So we want you to rule over us. So after a period of time, Dhul Nawas, he accepts the assignment. And he was the king, and the people of Himyar and the associated tribes came together to agree on his kingship. He was the last of the kings of Himyar. That doesn't mean Himyar finished, but there was a major event that happened in Himyar. Now, if you remember from the narrative of the Shiq and the Satih, we're on the eve of that about to come to pass. We're really, really close to the Abyssinian invasion that's about to happen. So when he says the last of the kings of Himyar, that doesn't mean Himyar faded away or that was its end. Rather, it means before Himyar passes into foreign hands. So Zur'a Dhul Nawas, his actual name was Yusuf, and he is the person who brought about the trenches mentioned. The trenches refers to the people of Ukhdud, right, in Surah Al-Buruj, which is going to be coming up, inshallah, with further discussion. We now have Sababu Wujud al-Nasraniyati bin Najran, the reason for Christianity entering Najran. Unit 3, Chapter 8. Imam Abdul Malik ibn Hisham rahimahullah says, وبنجران بقايا من أهل دين عيسى بن مريم عليه السلام على الإنجيل أهل فضل واستقامة من أهل دينه لهم رأس يقال له عبد الله بن الثامر وكان موقع أصل ذلك الدين بنجران وهي بأوسط أرض العرب في ذلك الزمان. There were remnant communities of the religion of Isa, the son of Maryam, peace be upon him, following the Injil in Najran. Those were the most favorable and upright from the people of their religion, declared as their leader, a man named Abdullah ibn Athamir. The place that place was the very origin of the religion in the locale which is known as Najran, which was in the middle portion of Arabia at the time. Close quote. Now Najran, Najran is just above Yemen in South Arabia. It's above there and spreads to near the middle of Arabia. So it goes from above Yemen and spreads into the central portion of Arabia. And so Christianity comes into there first. But before Christianity, you had the religion of the Messiah, Nabiyuna Isa alayhi salam. Some of the people came across the Gulf of Aqaba or came from Sham and arrived there. So they come down from Sham, specifically in the area of Palestine, which is composed of Gaza, the West Bank, Israel, and Jordan today. They came down from that region and arrived in Najran. Now Imam Abdul Malik ibn Hisham rahimahullah goes on to say, quote, وَأَهْلُهَا وَسَائِرُ الْعَرَبِ وسائر العرب كلها أهل أوثان يعبدونها، وذلك أن رجلا من بقايا أهل ذلك الدين يقال له فيميون وقع بين أظهرهم فحملهم عليه فدانوا به. Besides this remnant, the people of Najran and the rest of the Arabs were all worshipping idols. This lasted until a man from the remnant community of that religion, by the name of Faymiyun, came in their midst and brought them to his faith, and they came near to him and trusted him. حديث فيميون. قال ابن إسحاق: حدثني مغيرة بن أبي لبيد مولى الأخنس عن وهب بن منبه اليماني أنه حدثهم أن موقع ذلك الدين بنجران كان أن رجلا من بقايا أهل الدين عيسى بن مريم عليه السلام يقال له فيميون وكان رجلا صالحا مجتهدا زاهدا في الدنيا. Discussion around Faymiyun. Ibn Ishaq quoted from his chain of transmission from Wahab ibn Munabbih, which he started by saying, it was narrated to me by Al-Mughira ibn Abi Labid, the freed slave of Al-Akhnas, from Wahab ibn Munabbih al-Yamani, that he narrated to them that Najran had a man named Faymiyun from the remnant religion of Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam. This Faymiyun being a righteous, pious, hard-working man who avoided the earthly life. مجاب الدعوة وكان سائحا ينزل بين القرى لا يعرف بقرية إلا خرج منها إلى قرية لا يعرف بها وكان لا يأكل إلا من كسب يديه وكان بناء يحمل الطين وكان يعظم الأحد. His supplications were accepted, and he was calling the people to the religion, coming down to the various towns and villages without being known. There was no place that could be known about, except that he'd been there, left and went on to another place. The only food he ate was what he earned from labor that he had done with his own hands. He helped stack clay and make buildings every day, and he used to venerate the day of Sunday for special worship. فإذا كان يوم الأحد لم يعمل فيه شيئا وخرج إلى فودات من الأرض يصلي بها حتى يمسى. قال: وكان في قرية من قرى الشام يعمل عمله ذلك مستخفيا وفطن لشأنه رجل من أهلها يقال له صالح. On that day he did no work at all. He came out of the desert without any provision and prayed there as well until he moved on. He was once in a village in Sham doing his normal worship and business and concealed himself from the people. There was a man from the people of Sham who was very impressed with Faymiyun. His name was Salih. فحبه الصالح محبا لم يحبه شيئا كان قبله فكان يتبعه حين ذهب ولا يفطن له فيميون حتى خرج مرة في يوم الأحد إلى فلاة من الأرض كما كان يصنع وقد أتبعه صالح وفيميون لا يدري. Salih loved Faymiyun more than he had loved anyone before. He followed Faymiyun wherever he went, but Faymiyun paid him no mind. One day, Faymiyun left on a Sunday to go to the waterless desert, as was his habit, but Salih had followed him without Faymiyun knowing anything. فجلس صالح منه منظر العين مستخفيا منه لا يحب أن يعلم من مكانه وقام فيميون يصلي فبينما هو يصلي إذ أقبل نحو التنين يعني الحية ذات الرؤوس السبعة. Salih sat far enough away from him where he could see Faymiyun, but not the other way around. Faymiyun did not like for people to know his whereabouts, but when he made salah, a large snake with 7 heads appeared. فلما رأه فيميون دعا عليها فماتت ورآها صالح ولم يدري ما أصابها فخافها عليه فعيل عوله فصرخ: يا فيميون التنين قد أقبل نحوك. فلم يلتفت إليه وأقبل على صلاته حتى فرغ منها فأمسى وانصرف. When Faymiyun saw that, he supplicated against the snake and it died. Salih witnessed this and did not know what to think, so he became afraid, not knowing what had happened to the snake. He called out to Faymiyun, Faymiyun, look out! The snake is in your direction, facing you. But Faymiyun did not answer. Rather, he continued his salah until he completed. Then he finished his words and turned around. وعرف أنه قد عرف وعرف صالح أنه قد رأى مكانه فقال له: يا فيميون تعلم والله ما أحببت شيئا قط حبك وقد أردت صحبتك والكينونة معك حين كنت. فقال: ما شئت أمري كما ترى. فإن علمت أنك تقوي عليه فنعم. He knew that Salih knew him, and he'd seen him now. And Salih knew that he now knew the living space where Faymiyun was. Salih said, Faymiyun, you know by Allah, I've not loved anyone more than I love you. And I want to be your companion and the one to accompany wherever you go. Faymiyun answered, that is your choice. My situation is just as you see. So if you believe you have the strength to carry on, then do so. Come along then. Close quote. Now what this establishes is that Faymiyun, when he had made dua against the snake and it had died, Salih couldn't see from his vantage point that the snake was completely dead. So maybe from his standpoint, it might have looked like the snake was still crouching, lying in wait. And not, so whatever Faymiyun had done, maybe the snake had died but not dropped down. Maybe it had died and stayed frozen in place, or maybe it had died and was leaned against something. So Salih, looking from his vantage point, might have thought that the snake was still in a crouching position to strike. What we should also remember is that Faymiyun is making his salah, so he is uninterested in what is happening until he finishes his salah and notices that Salih is now there watching him and asks to become his companion, the kaynuna, to be his companion, to have suhbah with him, and kaynuna, to accompany him as much as possible. Now let's look at what happens after this. Imam Abdul Malik ibn Hisham rahimahullah says, فلزمه صالح وقد كاد أهل القرية يفطنون لشأنه وكان إذا فجأه العبد به ضر دعا له فشف وإذا دعي إلى أحد به ضر لم يأتيه وكان الرجل من أهل قرية ابن الضرير فسأل عن شأن Faymiyun. Salih from that point on began to accompany him. The people of the city had almost noticed his situation once. When traveling with Faymiyun, Salih saw a slave with a crippling injury come to Faymiyun and ask for a prayer. When the prayer was made, the man was healed. But whenever he was called to someone to heal them, he would not go to them. There was a man from the people of the city who was ill. Then he asked about Faymiyun. فقيل له إنه لا يأتي أحد دعاه ولكنه رجل يعمل الناس البنيان بالأجر فعمل الرجل لابنه ذلك ووضعه في حجرته فألقي عليه ثوبا ثم جاءه فقال له يا Faymiyun إني قد أردت أن أعمل في بيتي عملا فانطلق معي إليه حتى تنظر إليه. So it was said to him that he did not know anyone that called him, but there was a man who made buildings for people and earned his living that way. Then the man leaned on his son, and he was put in his room and a cloth put over him and came to Faymiyun. He said to Faymiyun, I was planning on doing some work in my house. He said he would stay with me until you come look at him. Close quote. Now this area, the reason why Faymiyun did not go to people that asked for him. So he would make supplication for the man. So when it mentions he prayed for him, he made dua for him. He would supplicate for him and the man would be healed. But whenever he was called to someone to heal them, he would not go to them. There are pressing reasons for this. One of the reasons he didn't is because he didn't want this associated with a wage, or that it was something he did for people's entertainment or their wage. This is something that's purely given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he didn't want it associated with a wage. In addition to that, he also, you have to remember, Faymiyun is in a land where the people are engaged in idolatry of all kinds. So he didn't know this might be a trap. He didn't want to be discovered. He wasn't in a land where most people worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in totality. He's in a land where most of the people engaged in idolatry. So he was very careful and very diligent about his personal safety. But then he comes across someone. There was a man who made buildings for people and earned his living, right? And then he leaned on his son because he wanted his son to bring Faymiyun to him. And so by his son coaxing Faymiyun, he hoped that his son would then uncover him so Faymiyun could see the condition he was in and possibly heal him. And this is a case for the righteous people. So Imam Ibn Hisham rahimahullah goes on to say, quote, فأشارتك عليه فانطلق معه حتى دخل حجرته ثم قال له ما تريد أن تعمل في بيتك هذا؟ قال كذا وكذا. ثم انتشط الرجل الثوب عن الصبي ثم قال له يا فيميون عبد من عباد الله أصابه ما ترى فادع الله له. فدعا له فيميون فقام الصبي ليس به بأس. So he pointed the way and Faymiyun followed until he reached the house and came in the chamber. He asked the man, what do you want me to do in this house of yours? He mentioned what he desired. And then the man pulled a sheet from the boy and said, Faymiyun, this is one of the slaves of Allah who's been afflicted by what you see. Supplicate to Allah for him. So Faymiyun supplicated for him. And the young man stood up without any problem. وعرف فيميون أنه قد عرف فخرج من القرية واتبعه صالح فبينما هو يمشي في بعض الشام إذ مر بشجرة عظيمة فناده منه رجل فقال يا فيميون قال نعم قال ما زلت أنظرك وأقول متى هو جاء حتى سمعت صوتك فعرفت أنك هو لا تبرح حتى تقوم علي فإني ميت الآن. People came to know about Faymiyun more than he had already been known. So he decided to leave from the city with Salih following him. They were both traveling on their way when they went to Sham and passed by a large tree with a man hiding behind it that called them. He said, Faymiyun. When he answered in the affirmative, the man said, I always wait for you, and I ask myself when you are going to come until I hear your voice and I know that it's you. Do not go away until you stand over me as I'm dying. And I ask for this one thing. قال فمات وقام عليه حتى رأوه ثم انصرف وتبعه الصالح حتى وطأ بعض عرض العرب فعدوا عليهما فاختفتهما سيارة من بعض العرب فخرجوا بهما حتى باعوهما بنجران. Then the man that had been waiting behind the tree, he died suddenly. And Faymiyun stood over him so that the man could see him. Then he left with Salih following him. They traveled on until they came to one of the Arab lands. One of the Arab groups settled upon them, kidnapped them, and took them hostage in one of the Arab caravans. And they left their encampment with the two of them. The Arabs passed by the area of Najran and then sold them to the Najran people. وأهل نجران يومئذ على دين العرب يعبدون نخلة طويلة بين أظهرهم لها عيد في كل سنة. إذا كان ذلك العيد علقوا عليها كل ثوب حسن وجدوه وحلي النساء. At that time, the people of Najran were on the religion of the Arabs, worshipping a large palm tree that was in their midst. There was a festival for this every year, and when it came, they would hang on this tree all the nice garments and tinsels and clothes that they could find, and the beautiful jewelry of women. ثم خرجوا إليها فعكفوا عليها يوما فابتاع فيميون رجل من أشرافهم وابتاع صالحا آخر. فكان فيميون إذا قام من الليل يتهجد في بيت له أسكنه إياه سيد يصلي استرج له البيت نورا حتى يصبح من غير مصباح. They would then go to it and remain there for the day. Faymiyun, when he was sold, was purchased by a nobleman from the Najran people, while Salih was sold to another noble. In his new home, Faymiyun used to make salah the whole of the night and tahajjud and vigil in a small hut his master had him live in. But his light used at night would burn out by the morning as he spent all that time in salah. But there was another light that came to pass, and that light would burn and stay without a lamp. فرأى ذلك سيده فعجبه ما يرى منه فسأله عن دينه فأخبره به وقال له فيميون إنما أنتم في باطل إن هذه النخلة لا تضر ولا تنفع ولو دعوت عليها إلهي التي أعبده لأهلكها وهو الله وحده لا شريك له. When Faymiyun's master saw that, he was greatly surprised by what he saw and asked about his religion. Faymiyun told him his religion and said, you are only upon falsehood, you and all these people. This date palm cannot help and cannot harm. And if I was to call upon it, وَلَوْ دَعَوْتَ عَلَيْهَا إِلَهِ الَّذِي أَعْبُدَهُ, if you are to call upon it as a god, or say that it's my God, which I should worship, I will call upon Allah alone, who there is no partner for him. He is alone and unique in his oneness, and there's no partner for him. I will call on him to destroy it. قال فقال له سيده فافعل فإنك إن فعلت دخلنا في دينك وتركنا ما نحن عليه. قال فقام فيميون فطهر وصلى ركعتين ثم دعا الله عليها فأرسل الله عليها ريحا فجعفتها من أصلها فألقتها فاتبعه عند ذلك أهل نجران على دينه فحملهم على الشريعة من دين عيسى بن مريم عليه السلام نبينا. His master told him, go ahead. Go ahead if you're able. If you can do such a thing, we shall enter your religion en masse, and we will leave what we now believe and what we're upon. Faymiyun then stood up, purified himself, made 2 rak'ah of salah, then called on Allah. Allah then sent a strong wind to it, tore it out of the ground by its roots, and it was thrown down. At that point, the people of Najran followed his religion. Then he brought them to the law from the religion of Isa ibn Maryam عليه السلام. ثم دخلت عليهم الأحداث التي دخلت على أهل دينهم بكل أرض. فمن هنالك كانت النصرانية بنجران في أرض العرب. After that, then there came to the people of Najran all the newly invented matters of their religion from every land. But at this point, this is how Christianity entered the land of Najran in the land of the Arabs. قال ابن إسحاق فهذا حديث وهب منبه عن أهل نجران. Ibn Ishaq mentioned that the narrator of this information is a speech of Wahb al-Munabbih that he took from the people of Najran. خبر عبد الله ibn Thamir, Unit 3, Chapter 9. The news of Abdullah, the son of Thamir. Abdullah ibn Thamir والاسم الأعظم. قال ابن إسحاق حدثني يزيد بن زياد عن محمد بن كعب القرظي وحدثني أيضا بعض أهل نجران عن أهلها أن أهل نجران كانوا أهل الشرك يعبدون الأوثان وكان في قرية من قرائها قريبا من نجران ونجران القرية العظمى التي إليها جماع أهل تلك البلاد سحر يعلم غلمان أهل نجران السحر. Discussing Abdullah, the son of Thamir, and the greatest name of Allah. Muhammad ibn Ka'ab al-Qurdi narrated to us from some of the people of Najran that the people of that land were upon idolatry, worshipping idols, and there were people in one of the cities nearby to Najran, while Najran is the greatest city which the people used to flock to. There was a magician, and he was teaching 2 youths in the city magic. فَلَمَّا نَزَلَهَا فَيْمِيُّونَ. When Faymiyun first came to the city, he had a small tent between Najran and the city where the magician resided. ولم يسموه لي باسمه الذي سماه به وهو منبه قالوا رجل نزلها ابنته خيمة بين نجران وبين تلك القرة التي بها الساحر فجعل أهل نجران يرسلون غلمانهم إلى ذلك الساحر فيعلمهم السحر فبعث إليه الثامر ابنه عبد الله بن الثامر مع غلمان أهل نجران. When Faymun came to the city, firstly, he had a small tent between Najran and the city where the magicians resided. So the people of Najran used to send their 2 youths to that magician to learn the art. Then a man named Athamir decided to send his son Abdullah with the 2 youths. فكان إذا مر بصاحب الخيمة أعجبه ما يرى منه من صلاته وعبادته فجعل يجلس إليه ويسمع منه حتى أسلم فوحد الله وعبده وجعل يسأله عن شرع الإسلام حتى إذا فقه فيه جعل يسأله عن الاسم الأعظم وكان يعلمه فكتمه إياه. Abdullah, the son of Athamir, used to pass by the tent of Faymiyun and was surprised by the salah and the worship he saw the man inside. So he decided to sit down and speak to him. He sat and listened to him until he came to believe what he said, and he entered Islam. He declared Allah one. He declared Allah alone and one in his uniqueness and worshipped him. Then he asked about the revealed laws of Islam until he understood it. After that, he asked about the greatest name of Allah and he knew it. فَيُعَلِّمُهُ. He Faymiyun taught it to him, فَيَعْلَمُهُ, and he knew it, but he kept it to himself. وقال له يا أخي يا ابن أخي إنك لن تحمله أخشى عليك ضعفك عنه والثامر أبو عبد الله لا يظن إلا أن ابنه يختلف إلى الساحر كان يختلف الغلمان فلما رأى عبد الله أن صاحبه قد ظن به عنه وتخوف ضعفه فيه وعمد إلى قداح. Faymiyun then said to the boy, Dear son, indeed you will never be able to carry it, and I fear for your weakness at the time due to it. Athamir came looking for his son, as he thought that his son had been delayed going to the magician just as the two youths had been. Then Abdullah saw that the companion that came with him, and he feared his weakness. So he went to the divining arrows and gathered them together. Then Allah did not leave any name to remain that the man knew, except he wrote it on the arrow. And for every name there was an arrow that it was attached to when affixed. فجمعها ثم لم يبقى لله اسما يعلمه إلا كتبه في قدح لكل اسم قدح حتى إذا أحصاها أوقد لها نارا ثم جعل يقذفها فيها قدحا قدحا حتى إذا مر بالاسم الأعظم قذف فيها يقدحه فوثب القدح حتى خرج منها لم تضره شيئا فأخذه ثم آتى صاحبه فأخبره أنه قد علم الاسم الذي كتمه. Once he had gathered them all, then he lit a fire and stoked it, throwing every arrow into it, until when he put in the arrow bearing the greatest name, the arrow jumped out of the fire and was not affected. Then the man took it, and his companion came with it, and Abdullah informed him that he knew the name which he had concealed, the greatest name. فقال وما هو؟ قال هو كذا وكذا. قال وكيف علمته؟ فأخبره به صنع. قال أي ابن أخي قد أصبته فأمسك على نفسك وما أظن أن تفعل. The man asked, what is the name? When he was told, the man said, how did you learn that? He was informed, the man, of what had transpired with Faymiyun. The companion said, I see, dear son. You have already spoken rightly. Protect yourself, lest I think something befall you in this regard. Abdullah ibn al-Thamir يدعو إلى التوحيد فجعل عبد الله بن الثامر الدخل نجران لم يلقى أحدا به ضرا إلا قال يا عبد الله أتوحد الله وتدخل في ديني وادعو الله فيعافيك مما أنت فيه من البلاء فيقول نعم فيوحد الله ويسلم ويدعو له فيشفى. Abdullah ibn al-Thamir calls to Tawheed. So, when Abdullah, the son of al-Thamir, entered Najran proper, everyone he met that had an illness, he told them, Slave of Allah, will you believe in the oneness and uniqueness of Allah and enter into my religion so I can call on Allah and He can heal you of whatever infirmity ails you? Then the person would say, yes I do. Then he would declare Allah's uniqueness and oneness, then become Muslim. He would then be prayed for and he would be healed by the supplication. حتى لا يبقى بنجران أحد به ضر إلا أتاه فأتبعه على أمره ودعا له فعوفي حتى رفع شأنه إلى ملك نجران فدعه فقال له أفسدت علي أهل قريتي وخالفت ديني ودين آبائي لأمثلن بك قال لا تقدر على ذلك. This went on, the people with infirmities coming to him, following him, being healed and then believing, until finally it came to the attention of the king of Najran. He called Abdullah, the son of al-Thamir, into his presence, and he said, have you turned my city against me, corrupted the area, contradicted my religion, and that of my fathers, so that they might become like you? Then shall I make you an example? Abdullah said, you will not be able to do that. Close quote. Now this area is you have Abdullah ibn al-Thamir coming to the truth of the matter. Now, in live readings, this text is sometimes been read as أفسدت علي أهل قريتي وخالفت. But in some, أفسدت علي أهل قريتي وخالفت. Right, so one is, has corruption not been brought to me by the people of my city, and my religion and the religion of my fathers has been opposed. But in another live reading, I heard a teacher, أفسدت, right? Have you not corrupted or turned the people of my city against me? وَخَالَفْتَ دِينِي, and corrupted my religion and the religion of my fathers. فَأَمْثِلَنَّ بِكَ, and then I will make an example of you. And so he says, you won't be able to do this. So he testifies Abdullah ibn Thamir was on the road to learning dark arts and magic of all kinds, all forms of wickedness. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided him. And this type of guidance is a guidance in which he supernaturally, not through anyone else, but through his sole guidance. This is known as irshad, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supernaturally guides you through himself, not through anyone else. Had Allah sent someone else to take him off the path towards dark arts, that would have been hidayah. But no, instead, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put something in his heart, and he's walking along his way, and then he sees Faymiyun, and then he goes in and sits down and listens. Now let's look further at what happens with Abdullah ibn Thamir. Imam ibn Hisham rahimahullah says, quote, قال فجعل يرسل به إلى الجبل الطويل فيطرح على رأسه فيقع على الأرض ليس به بأس وجعل يبعث به إلى مياه بنجران بحور لا يقع فيها شيء إلا هلك فيلقى فيها فيخرج ليس به بأس. The king sent him away and had him brought to a tall mountain and thrown off to land on his head and be killed. But when he fell and went down, he was not injured and survived. When this occurred, he was taken to the waters of Najran where he would be drowned. But when he was thrown into it, he found his footing and left from it unharmed. فلما غلبه قال له عبد الله بن الثامر إنك والله لن تقدر على قتلي حتى توحد الله فتؤمن بما آمنت به فإنك إن فعلت ذلك سلطت علي فقتلتني. When he was victorious in his struggles, Abdullah, the son of Thamir, said, you will not be able to kill me until you believe in the oneness and uniqueness of Allah. Then you believe and have Iman in that which I have Iman in. Then you will be given authority, and if you wish to kill me, you'll be able to do so, and not sooner than that. قال فوحد الله تعالى ذلك الملك وشهد شهادة عبد الله بن الثامر ثم ضربه بعصا في يده فشجه شجة غير كبيرة فقتله ثم هلك الملك مكانه واستجمع أهل نجران على دين عبد الله بن الثامر وكان على ما جاء به عيسى بن مريم من الإنجيل بحكمه. So the king declared the oneness and uniqueness of Allah, exalted be He, and bore testimony of all what Abdullah the son of Thamir had mentioned. He then had him taken and beaten with sticks in his hands, hung upside down, and killed. The king after that destroyed the place where the boy had been. But the people of Najran, upon seeing that, all entered into his religion and gathered upon the way of Abdullah the son of Thamir. He had been upon what Isa the son of Maryam came with from the Injil and his ruling. ثم أصابهم مثل ما أصاب أهل دينهم من الأحداث فمن هنالك كان أصل النصرانية بالنجران والله أعلم بذلك. And they were tested with the same thing that the people of their religion suffered due to newly invented matters. So, this was the origin of the spread of Christianity in Najran, and Allah knows best about that. قال ابن إسحاق فهذا حديث محمد بن كعب القرظي وبعض أهل نجران عن عبد الله بن الثامر والله أعلم أي ذلك كان. Ibn Ishaq mentioned this is a narrative of Muhammad ibn Ka'b al-Qurzi and some of the people of Najran regarding Abdullah ibn Thamir, and Allah knows best which of those transpired first. Close quote. So this one is important because it establishes whether Salih met Faymiyun first or whether Abdullah ibn Thamir met Faymiyun first. That's why he's saying Allah knows best whichever happened first. They were both contemporaneous to him, obviously, because Salih meets him and then Abdullah ibn Thamir meets him. So whichever one happened first, Allah knows best. So Imam Abdul Malik ibn Hisham rahimahullah says, quote, ذو نواس يدعو أهل نجران إلى اليهودية فصار إليهم ذو نواس بجنوده فدعهم إلى اليهودية وخيرهم بين ذلك والقتل فاختاروا القتل فخد لهم الأخدود فحرق من حرق بالنار. Dhu Nawas calls the people of Najran to enter Judaism. Dhu Nawas then came to them with his army and called them to embrace Judaism and gave them the choice between that or death. The people chose death. So large trenches were dug and a fire kindled, the people being burned with it. وقتل من قتل بالسيف ومثل بهم حتى قتل منهم قريبا من 20,000. ففي ذي نواس وجنده تلك أنزل الله تعالى على رسوله سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. Others were killed by the sword. So he killed some by the sword. The grand total of this exceeding the number of 20,000 people. So it was about the man, Dhu Nuwas, and his army that Allah exalted be He sent down to His messenger, our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about this discussion. So some were killed with the sword, while others were killed with the burning. So those who were burned were made to go down to the fire. Those who were killed with the sword were slashed with the sword in order to make an example of them. And he killed some 20,000 of them. And it is this man, Dhu Nawas, that was spoken about when Allah exalted be He sent down the revelation on our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he said, وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْمَوْعُودِ وَشَاهِدٍ وَمَشْهُودٍ قُتِلَ أَصْحَابُ الْأُخْدُودِ النَّارِ ذَاتِ الْوَقُودِ إِذْ هُمْ عَلَيْهَا قُعُودٌ وَهُمْ عَلَى مَا يَفْعَلُونَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ شُهُودٌ وَمَا نَقَمُوا مِنْهُمْ إِلَّا أَنْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَمِيدِ. By the sky with its constellations, by the promised day, the witness and that which is witnessed, the people of the trench were killed. They were made to go down into the fire kindled for them. And those present were witnesses to what they did to the people of Iman. And they did no vengeance to them for any reason, except that they had Iman in Allah, the Almighty, the worthy of praise. Surah Al-Buruj, the 85th Surah, ayat 1-8. تفسير الأخدود قال ابن هشام الأخدود الحفر المستطيل في الأرض كالخندق والجدول ونحوه وجمعه أخاديد. قال ذو الرمة واسمه غيلان بن عقبة أحد بني عدي بن عبد المناف بن أد ابن تاجنة ابن إلياس بن مضر. The word أخدود signifies a rectangular trench or chasm dug into the ground. And similar words to Ukhdud include things like Khandaq, Jadul or Judul, and so forth. The plural form of Ukhdud is Akhadid. The following poetry was uttered by Dhu Ramma Ghaylan, the son of Uqba, one of the children of Adi, the son of Abdul Manaf, the son of Abdan, the son of Tabikha, the son of Ilyas, the son of Mudar. من العراقية التي يحيل لها بين الفلاة وبين النخل أخدود. It was from the conquest of Iraq which Ukhdud were dug, a trench that was between one tribe and the date palms, nice and snug. يعني جدولا. وهذا البيت في قصيدة لها قال يقال لأثر السيف والسكين في الجلد وأثر الصوت ونحوه أخدود وجمعه أخديد. The poetry references Ukhdud, sometimes called Judul or Jadul. It is mentioned that the marks left by sword, knife, or whip slashing wounds on the body are also sometimes called Ukhdud, or in the plural form, Akhadid. نهاية عبد الله بن الثامر قال ابن إسحاق ويقال كان في من قتل ذو النواس عبد الله بن الثامر وهو رأسهم وإمامهم. The demise of Abdullah, the son of Athamir, and what transpired from there. Ibn Ishaq mentioned that among those killed by Dhu Nuwas was Abdullah, the son of Athamir, who was the head and imam of the people at the time. قال ابن إسحاق حدثني عبد الله بن أبي بكر بن محمد بن عمرو بن حزم أنه حدث أن رجل من أهل نجران كان في زمان عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه حفر خربة من خرب النجران لبعض حاجته فوجدوا عبد الله بن الثامر تحت دفن منها قاعدا واضعا يده على ضربة في رأسه ممسكا عليها بيده. Ibn Ishaq narrated a historical note. It was narrated to me by Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr ibn Muhammad ibn Amr ibn Hazm that it was narrated to him, there was a man from the people of Najran in the reign of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, who was excavating some of the ruins of Najran for some reason, and they found the body of Abdullah, the son of Athamar, under a burial chamber. He was sitting up, his hand placed on the area in his head where he had been struck with the arrow. He had been holding the wound with his hand. فَإِنْ أَخِّرَتْ يَدَهُ عَنْهَا تنبعث دمه وإذا أرسل يده ردها عليها فأمسك دمها وفي يده خاتم مكتوب فيه ربي الله فكتب فيه إلى عمر بن الخطاب يخبر بأمره فكتب إليه عمر رضي الله عنه فقال أنا قره على حاله وردوا عليه الدفن الذي كان عليه ففعلوا. When he moved it, blood came to the surface. Then when he brought the hand down, it returned to its place without being moved, keeping the blood from dripping. In his hand was a ring with the engraving, "My Lord is Allah." The man who had found the body wrote a letter to Umar ibn al-Khattab explaining to him what he had found. Umar wrote a letter back telling him that he should affirm his state and then return him back to the place of burial. The man did so, and nothing more was done to the body. Close quote. So we see here what had happened with Abdullah ibn Thamir. They discovered his body. So this is in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Now, to understand the background of this, because the listener may wonder, so what's the background to this? Like, what time period are we looking at? And this is a very good question. This is 600 years before the coming of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that this is occurring. So Nabiyuna Isa alayhi salam is taken up in the year AD 33. AD 33. And Faymiyun and Abdullah ibn Athamir are around that time or not long after. They're around that time. So these are events that are 600 years before. Now, keep this in mind. Keep this in mind. When it mentions, let's go back to some of what was discussed. When Abdullah ibn Thamir is speaking to the people of Najran, which is just above Yemen, Dhu Nawas decides to kill them because he calls the people of Najran to enter into Judaism. He gets down to Najran because who is Dhu Nawas? Remember the incident of Lakhni'ah and Dhu Nawas, Zur'a Dhu Nawas, the brother of Hassan ibn Tuban, kills him. This is the very Dhu Nawas. This is the very one. And remember, the Himyar does what? It converts en masse to Judaism. Remember the two rabbis that we discussed before? So the two rabbis come to Tuba'a, and some signs happen with the mystic fire, and they then impress upon this to Tuba'a, and the Tuba'a converts to Judaism, and the Himyar does. Well, Dhu Nawas enters into the Judaism that had been given by the two rabbis. And when he does, he then extends his authority because Najran is just above the Yemen and extends into the central portion of Arabia. He extends his rule into the Najran and calls the people of Najran, "You're all entering into Judaism." To which they say, "No, we're not." And Abdullah ibn Thamir is the one that's there. And when he becomes so popular that he can't stop him, he can't stop Abdullah ibn Thamir. In fact, people are entering into their religion, so they're leaving idolatry in Najran and entering into the religion of Nabi Isa alayhi salam, which is the religion of the prophets from before. But he wants them to enter into Judaism because they've already entered into that. And so they say, "No, we're not entering into Judaism. We're not doing it." And so he says, "You either enter into this or I kill you." And so when they refuse to do so, some of them are killed with a sword and some are put into the ditches that are burned. And this is where Ashab al-Ukhdud are mentioned in Surah Al-Buruj, the 85th surah. Right? So this puts it in a historical context. And so you can see then after this, so you have these incidents happening 600 years before. Then in the time of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, this is some 30 years, 630 years later, while they're excavating the ruins of Najran, they find the body of Abdullah ibn Thamir, and his hand is clutching the portion of his head where the injury was. And when they move the hand down to see the injury, some blood rises to the top, but then the hand goes back up to where it was automatically. And then they see his ring that says, Rabbi Allah, my Lord is Allah. That was the greatest name. It's that name, Allah. In that instant, we see a number of things. Number one, we see Dhu Nawas placed in history, which places Lakhni'a and the others in history, 600 years plus before. We see Faymiyun and Saleh and Abdullah ibn Thamir placed in history, 600 years before. We see that the saints, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has supernaturally preserved the saints, supernaturally preserved, mashallah, to where the blood, their bodies are still supple, the blood is still flowing, and they're still protected. So Umar radiallahu anhu, when he receives news of this, he's not in shock, but rather he says, affirm his state, meaning note this down, make record of it, affirm his state, and then return him back to his place of burial. The man did so, and nothing else was done to the body. So these are some of the things that we learn from this. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with all this, we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in knowledge, give us more goodness so we can reflect upon what we were given. Inshallah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserves us, what I want to do is, now that we know all of this about how the deen of Nabiyyuna Isa alayhi salam has come to the people of Najran, now I want to discuss the things that Imam Abdul Malik ibn Hisham mentioned after when Christianity starts, right? So, because he says, and they were tested with the same thing that the people of their religion suffered due to newly invented matters. And this was the origin of the spread of Christianity in Najran. So first came the deen of Nabiyyuna Isa Islam, and then what came to be known as Christianity. So what I want to do is I want to come back next lesson, inshallah, and this, I will call it an addendum. An addendum. And I think I will title this Christianity at the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I want to walk you through Christianity after, so you have the religion of Nabiyyuna Isa alayhi salam. Once it gets corrupted and becomes Christianity, what was it like on the eve of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What was Christianity like? What were the Christians like? What are the things that had happened up until that point? And why is all of this important to tie all these pieces together? Because when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is born, according to the Kafir calendar in AD 570, what's the state of the world? What are the state of things for Christianity? We already explained before what Judaism was like, what the conditions were for Judaism. Now we want to explain what Christianity was like, and then when it comes to what idolatry was like, how did idolatry come to the world and to Arabia more importantly, because we're discussing the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I want to go bit by bit so that by the time we get to the birth of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I hope that we have a really good working knowledge of the classical period and the ancient period. So when we go into this, we're in the full light of history and we really benefit from the things that come into play, inshallah. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us success in this endeavor. And we say, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك إنه غفور رحيم. يا أرحم الراحمين. ولا إله إلا الله. والسلام عليكم.